Hi, everyone. Good morning. We are going to get started with our program. I'm Margaret Everett. I'm interim provost. I think I know many of you, and it's wonderful to see you all here this morning. It's a great turnout for our winter symposium. I think many of you know that we have done a winter symposium every year for many years, as long as I can remember. And it's a wonderful opportunity to bring the campus community together to discuss important issues and initiatives. And this year is certainly no exception. We're going to talk about Centers of Excellence, and you're going to hear shortly from the president about his vision for Centers of Excellence. I do want to thank just a few people, and then I'm going to turn it over to our president. I want to thank Jennifer Dill, our interim vice president for research, who's really pulled this off and done a lot of organizing and planning and thinking and engaging faculty in the design of today and in the discussion around the center. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for your leadership. And I also want to thank the staff in RSP and in the Office of Academic Innovation, well, them too, but the Office of Academic Affairs, Vinelda and Colette and Randy and all of the staff who've helped pull together today's event. So with that, it is a pleasure to turn it over to our president, Professor Qureshi. And he's going to talk about his vision for Centers of Excellence. Thanks so much.
Good morning. Thank you, Margaret. As I was getting ready for today, I usually start my day around 4:35. I was thinking, so how many of our faculty are early risers? And I said, this will be a good test to see how many actually show up. So I'm pleasantly surprised, and I'm glad to see all of you here. And I'm looking forward to the discussions of today and many others as we go through some of what we are trying to do together, which is to really establish centers of excellence within PSU. But first, I want to take this opportunity to thank every one of you for making what PSU is today. It's a great institution with a lot to celebrate, and really I'm grateful to everything you are doing and you have done. This is really a university that inspires fearless discovery through experiential learning and research. I want to thank you also for the interest you have shown for the cross-disciplinary and collaborative research. And I would like to see the effort that you have started to grow and expand. And I'm looking forward especially to today's discussion, because this is an opportunity that you're going to bring your ideas, your innovative ideas together, and I'm looking forward to the outcome of these discussions. Now, as you know, all of these have been part of trying to establish these centers of excellence. We like to have a few of those over the course of the next 3 to 5 years established. And I want to make sure that you all understand this is not just me talking. This is something that we want to make sure it happens. And so we are going to put the resources behind it to make it happen based on what you folks come forward, your ideas, I also want to see what is it going to take to implement your ideas. So some of you may say, Ramat, we already have so many centers around PSU. And of course we do. And there are great ones. The one example that really stands out is the Transportation Research and Education Center that Jennifer Dillon and her team have been working for the past 10 years. And it's a great example of what we are looking to have, but a few more of those. What is special about that center is that it really satisfies many of the attributes we are looking for in these centers of excellence. It has a major funding from the National Institute for Transportation and Communities. As you may know, that center over the last 10 years roughly has been able to attract about $29 million of funding, external funding for that. It is by U.S. Department of Transportation, and it is one of 5 of such institutes around the country. There's a ton of competition, but to be one of 5 of those in the country, that says a lot about the creativity, innovative idea, and the effort of our faculty that have been doing and our students in that center. And they have produced a great deal of innovative and creative ideas and research results that even Portland community by itself has benefited from all of those. But there are some things that you may or may not know about that center. That center brings expertise from fields of sociology, computer science, geography, psychology, economics, engineering, environmental science, business, urban studies, and I probably am missing a few. But you can see that it is not a single discipline. And more importantly, it is not just based on looking at the STEM side. It has all of the key aspects of what a center needs to have. It incorporates research ideas from across many disciplines within PSU, as well as partner universities that they have developed over the years. But altogether, these researchers, scholars, faculty, they have come together bringing their ideas from their perspective to this cross-disciplinary center, and that's why it has been successful. So I know that we are talking about, and I know there are centers, but what we want to call centers of excellence are those that have these special attributes. And we all know PSU has limited resources. So these centers, we're going to seed them. We're going to provide seed funding for about 3 years for each of these centers. But eventually, after 3 years, they have to become self-sustaining. That's why it's important that they should be focusing on areas that is of great interest to the community, and not just Portland and Oregon community, the global community. It should be something that attracts interest from whether it's federal government, states, or private or foundation, all of those. And as I said, look at what TREC has done and see that we already have done this. It's not something new. All we want to do is to create a few more of them in key areas that really helps Portland, Oregon, and the global community in that order. Uh, when you think about it, PSU has a culture of engaging our community. This is an asset. And this is part of what these centers of excellence need to have. And so I want to make sure that when you think about some of the activities we are already doing to engage community, you get a sense of what we are talking about. Just think about it. Faculty and students from the School of Arts and Design, they have been working with the city and social services to design temporary shelters. Our Population Research Center does the survey of individuals and families experiencing homelessness. That data ensures that Portland continue to be eligible for state and federal funding and allows agencies and not-for-profits to plan to meet the needs of homeless people here. The reason I'm talking about homeless is that this is an example of one of the areas that's of great importance to the community. And it's not just Portland. There are so many cities that are facing this problem. So if we were to come up with a solution, not only are we going to address a key needs of this community, we are addressing a global issue. Continuing in that regard, our OHSU, PSU, School of Public Health, our School of Social Work, our School of Business, Graduate School of Education, College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, all are playing important parts in solving this challenge related to homelessness. So now imagine if these efforts, instead of being a bit like islands, if they were integrated together. This is where you see 1 + 1 becoming 4. And that's what we are talking about. And then when you expand it to that scale, then you get the attention of whether it is from the federal side or the state side or some of these foundations that they are interested in helping to solve those problems. So I want you to think about the Center of Excellence just like a system that tries to generate solar power. When you think about the solar systems, they have a lot of mirrors and lenses. But what do? Those mirrors capture the light, the lenses concentrate it. This is what we want to see, is that we want centers to take these diverse ideas from you. And just like a lens, concentrated in order to be able to really address key issues. So consider a large pool of top quality faculty, high-profile institutional partners, which we do have, and we can establish a lot more. Business collaborations. I cannot tell you how many meetings I have had with the business leaders and how they are interested in supporting and participating with PSU. Think about major federal and philanthropic funding. These are all the mirrors and lenses that it would take to make a center successful. Together, they can concentrate all of that light and create ideas and research outcomes that we cannot do them individually. So the same way that those concentrated lights create a lot of heat, meaning energy, our centers will also enhance our university's reputation. They will elevate our faculty's standing, and we will be able to attract new and top quality faculty. They will attract top quality students and will provide them with more opportunities to conduct cutting edge research and truly understand the meaning of experiential education. They will lure more investment, more opportunity for us to do philanthropy, and at the end, think about it, the impact that they will have on the expansion and development of our economy. But more than that, these centers of excellence will shine light on challenges facing our society. PSU faculty, just look at yourself. You are a great pool of talent. The energy and the experience you bring to the table. We can together solve many complex issues. PSU is an institution that has an ethos of engagement and action. That's what I'm excited about. In that spirit, I look forward to learning more today about your ideas of what these centers of excellence need to focus on. But I want to clear 2 points. Number one, don't think that these centers are going to be only around the STEM areas. In fact, for PSU to differentiate its centers of excellence, a major pillar of those centers has to have a strong liberal arts component, a strong social sciences components. Because if it's just looking at the techie side, there are plenty of universities already addressing that. Again, I want to go back to the example of the TREC, the Transportation Center. It is not focusing so much on the technology side. It's focusing on the social impact of that. And so that is what will make these centers unique. That's why it takes all of you, all of us, from technology all the way to social sciences, liberal arts, to make these centers successful. So I look forward to hearing all of your ideas and be happy to answer any questions. This is an exciting time for PSU. Thank you.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you, President Qureshi. For those of you who don't know me or that I haven't met yet, I'm Jennifer Dill. I'm interim Vice President of Research here at Portland State University, and otherwise I'm a professor of urban studies and planning, and as was mentioned, director of TREC normally. So welcome everyone. I'm really thrilled with the turnout this morning. I am not a morning person, so I'm one of those ones he was referring to. I didn't schedule this. So I've been working on moving the President's vision of these centers forward, and key, as he's expressed, key to that is input and ideas from faculty. So we know that a successful center needs to build on our strengths. So about 2 months ago, we put up a website with several center ideas, and we asked all of you to start brainstorming about those ideas, about what topics of centers might address those societal challenges. You discussed those ideas on the Google Docs, you added a lot of new ones, you discovered some new people on campus that were interested in similar topics, and you didn't complain, at least not directly to me, about the clunkiness of that whole website and the Google Docs. I appreciate your patience in what we put together. Thank you. So the intent of that site was to get some discussions started, to essentially get some ideas on paper, at least electronic paper on a website, before more direct discussions and in-person meetings could take place. And I know that they've already been taking place, and we'll be doing more of that later this morning. So as I've been talking with many of you and lurking on those Google Docs and sort of seeing what's going on, I'm inspired by many of the great ideas and discussions. And I'm confident that we're going to identify several centers to invest in starting next year. It's also clear that there's a lot of great research, scholarship, and creative activity happening on campus. I've discovered that through this process, but just in other things that we've been working on in research. It's one of the great benefits of taking this interim role is learning all the wonderful research going on campus that I had no idea that that's happening at PSU. It's very exciting. I want to make it clear, in addition to these centers, I've been talking with the president, and we do intend to make additional investments and work outside of this center's process. There's clearly a lot of ideas, a lot of energy going on. Some of it's going to end up in these centers, but not all of it in at least the beginning stages. And we definitely want to reward and spur a lot of the other activity going on. So you should expect a call for proposals from our office in the coming months for those other types of investments. So I want to give you an overview. There's an overview of what we're going to be doing today. So very shortly, I'll be introducing our keynote speaker, Professor Dan Sperling from UC Davis. Dan will share his decades of experience in forming and working with centers at UC Davis that are really models of what we envision here. Centers that support faculty and researchers in their work while solving some of our most pressing societal problems. His talk will inspire some new ideas, help answer some questions, and lay the groundwork for the rest of the morning. After a Q&A session with Dan, we'll have a broader discussion about centers here at PSU, what you as faculty and researchers want from a center, what concerns you might have, the challenges of doing centers, how centers should be governed, and how center success should be measured. As part of that discussion, we're going to use an instant polling tool to get some immediate feedback. It's a little hard with a group this large to sort of take verbal feedback from all of you. So we'll be using some instant polling. So I do recommend before we get that started, at some point, log into the Wi-Fi to make sure you have that access. And I'm hoping it works. I was on a conference call yesterday for a different conference, and a woman on there said, I've been at 7 conferences where we've tried to use this online polling thing, and it only worked once. And I was like, oh my gosh, I hope that's tomorrow is my one time that it works. So after that, we're going to have a short break. We're going to ask you to get up and move to different tables that are all numbered. We'll put up a key where you'll have some focus time to discuss in groups your center topics and in preparation for preparing the short first stage proposals that are due February 1st. And then at noon, I'm asking each group to give a short 1 minute, and I really do mean 1 minute, pitch for what challenge your center is going to address. And we'll talk more before we start that part of the discussion. We'll talk more and I'll explain in a bit more detail. Before I introduce Dan, I want to again thank the team that helped put this event together, including Vanelda Hopes, Amy Crelly, and Colette Yaspo, in addition to some input from my great Associate VP, Jason Podropsky. So thank all of you. Yes. All right, so it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Dr. Daniel Sperling. He's a professor of civil engineering and environmental science and policy and is the founding director of the Institute of Transportation Studies at University of California, Davis. He describes himself as a serial academic entrepreneur, and I think that's evident. He's been instrumental in starting at least 3 campus-wide centers at UC Davis. And in speaking with him over the dinner last night and earlier today, If you look at his bio, you can see he is a world-renowned expert in vehicles and fuels and energy technology and air pollution related to vehicles. He's written several books about it. He's on the California Air Resources Board. But he has said, he says, if there's anything I really do know, it's university centers. And so I think he's the perfect person to address us today. I will give you a few highlights. You have his bio, but I'm going to give you a few highlights that are there and that are not there. So in June 2013, he was named a recipient of the Blue Planet Prize, which has been described as a Nobel Prize for Environmental Sciences. That prize recognized in part his unique ability to bring together the top thinkers and strategists in academia, government, and industry to develop new vehicle and fuels policy approaches that are models for our world. He's written many books, many articles. His book in 2009, 2 Billion Cars Driving Towards Sustainability, if you're a regular viewer of the Jon Stewart Daily Show, he was interviewed there. And so Jon Stewart has read his book. That would be something I would aspire to, or now maybe Trevor Noah. In about a couple weeks, his newest book, 3 Revolutions, Steering Automated, Shared, and Electric Vehicles to a Better Future, will be coming out from Island Press, and he's starting to promote that book shortly. Amongst the many things that he's been involved in, he was the lead author for a chapter in the 2007 IPCC report, Mitigation of Climate Change, one example of the work that he's done. And way back when, I pulled something out of his bio that isn't written in front of you. He spent a couple years in the Peace Corps as an urban planner in Honduras. So wide range of experience that we're going to hear from. So with that, I want to welcome Dan Sperling.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much. It really is such a pleasure and honor to be here. I really am impressed with this whole initiative. And I really like that metaphor of President Qureshi saying, looking at solar energy as a way of collecting all of that energy out there and focusing it. As you'll see, and as Jennifer suggested, I really do believe and really committed to the idea of creating interdisciplinary centers. So I'm going to talk about that a lot. But, you know, just to set the stage before I get going, I do want to acknowledge how hard it really is. And so I have lots of examples I'm going to talk about, but, you know, just listening to the early comments, I want to give 2 examples of failures that kind of are not meant to be a bummer or, you know, to discourage you, but the challenges. So, you know, there was a discussion about UC Davis and Institute being an inspiration or model. Well, I was at MIT about 7 or 8 years ago, and they said exactly the same thing. They said, we want to create an institute just like yours on sustainable transportation. Well, they never did. They never were able to. Stanford. So I'm going to use, you know, some of the big names just to give you a sense that just because you're a big name doesn't mean you're going to be better at it. In fact, for many reasons, you're going to be worse at it. But Stanford, you know, I'm going to give you a story about we created an energy efficiency center at UC Davis, and we actually competed against Stanford and beat them to create it. But then they got a $100 million gift from someone. So, you know, we got $1 million for winning that. They got $100 million, you know. You know, that's the Stanford, Harvard kind of story. But you know what? 10 years later, they just shut it down because they treated it as a typical academic exercise where they gave funding to faculty, let them faculty just figure out how to use the money, but without any real commitment to engagement, to the broader interdisciplinary nature of it. So, okay, let me, okay, so that's me. So I'm going to give just to establish my credentials a little bit and to give you maybe hopefully a little inspiration. I'll tell you just a little bit about The main center, the main institute I run at UC Davis, although as Jennifer said, I've gotten into this habit of creating new ones every few years. But this is the one that is the most important to me. You know, it's 25 years old. We've got a lot of students. We actually have created our own graduate program that we administer through the Interdisciplinary Center, our Interdisciplinary Center, which is very unusual, but, you know, and I don't know the politics and institutional structure here very well, but this idea of linking an interdisciplinary research center with an interdisciplinary graduate program actually is a really smart thing. Universities rarely do it, but it just makes, there's so many synergies there. So anyway, we did that, and within our institute we have 5 centers. We have one of the other 4 national centers in transportation we host. So we got, between us, we got 2 out of the 5 in the country. But a lot of what it's about, and I think a lot of what my message here is about, is this creating this culture of engagement and going beyond your narrow academic expertise. And what that means is engaging with the outside world, engaging with companies, engaging with governments, local governments, state governments, national government, NGOs, and becoming relevant. You know, the homeless example is a good example of, you know, the kinds, we have an almost unlimited set of topics that we in the university can contribute to in a really positive, important way. And I happen to think, so, you know, one of the things I do about 10 years ago, I was appointed by Governor Schwarzenegger. That actually rolls off my tongue pretty comfortably now. Took a while. And so I'm on the board of the California Air Resources Board, which is considered, some consider it the most powerful government agency in California, although those that say it usually mean it in a negative way. But in that, I've really come to appreciate this relationship between the university and government in particular. There's a chasm. It's really, I think it borders on irresponsibility for those of us in the university. It's irresponsibility on the government side too. But we've created these cultures, these reward systems that make crossing that chasm difficult. But it's more important than ever because so little of our expertise is being used certainly in the public sector. And I take that as a responsibility for all of us to be thinking, not all of us, for those of us. Okay, there's a lot of people that are going to be in their lab, they're going to make real contributions. So I'm not talking to everyone, but probably this group is more the target audience of what I mean by that. So, you know, we do, like just our institute, we of course do lots of research. You know, that's the number one thing. You're doing research and you're training students. That's our primary activity and mission. But to do that well, you got to be innovative, you got to be creative in terms of we create research consortia that brings together different companies and government agencies. We do fundraising. I've got 2 fundraisers. I'm going to get into this topic of fundraising because that's always controversial on campuses, usually because the chief fundraiser of a campus always wants to have complete control. So we'll get into that issue in a moment. Communications and publicity, you know, all nowadays with social media, there's this challenge of, there's this cacophony out there. There's all this noise, and rising above it in a way that we really can make a contribution, bring our expertise. It's not straightforward, there's not a simple formula, but it's really important, and there are lots of ways of doing it. Events, workshops, conferences, we host delegations all the time, as well as doing all the traditional things that a center has to do, all the traditional administrative functions. And so there's just some illustration of some of the events we do, and another list. So all the way down at the right bottom, this is the only marketing I'm going to do in this whole talk. That's the book. that Jennifer referred to, 3 Revolutions, coming out in a few weeks. So that's the cover. And we are, we are hosting a big conference. And let me just talk about that for a second. Not so much, partly the book, but we're creating a whole platform set of activities around or connected with the book. The book is part of it. But we're creating a whole policy platform in this. So we're doing the research. So we have 2 parts. We're doing the research on behavior, on the technology, and so on, safety. But we're doing the policy side too. And the policy side is to engage especially local governments and state governments, because so many, in this particular case, so many of the changes we're talking about really are impacted or require leadership at the local level. And a lot of things in our society and our economy are like that. And so thinking about it in those terms, about where and how we can have an impact, is really important. So I'm starting, actually tomorrow, I'm starting my book tour, Southern California, Berlin, MIT. That's just in the next week and a half. I'm getting tired just thinking about it already. But it's really with the mission of what do we know in the university, and how do we bridge that chasm? And that's my other kind of metaphor for how to be thinking about this going forward. And then we train lots of students, and I just put it there because we have lots of companies that sponsor our students. In addition to everything else they do, we call these our corporate fellows, and it creates a special relationship between the students and the companies, and it strengthens the relationship we have overall. All right, so let me focus now on the point of this meeting and why I'm here. So to preface it, universities are really peculiar institutions. And so my wife is a CEO of a company. I can get her rolling in the aisles, laughing, rolling her eyeballs so easily. Almost any story I tell about the university, she can't believe it. So we are a unique and peculiar institution. We're very conservative as an institution. It's kind of ironic because we have the most liberal members of our society as members of our faculty, generally speaking. And yet, I like to say, I kind of entertained the group last night saying that universities are the most conservative institutions in the world next to the Catholic Church. So no offense to any of you, though. No more religion here. Okay, so what it means is that, first of all, the university have a very flat horizontal organizational structure versus a hierarchical one, like military or even most government agencies. We have a shared governance that I understand is alive and well at PSU, and it is at UC Davis, so I have lots of firsthand experience. I often use the expression, I have seen the enemy and he is us. And I'll get back to that, that thought in a moment. So we have tenured faculty that are mostly accountable to themselves and teaching and doing their research, but they're not very accountable to the institution. They're not very accountable to their boss. Loyalty is not an important attribute in a university organization. So, but understanding what we have, universities are intentionally designed to be conservative institutions to retain the disciplinary structure and disciplinary focus. And there's a lot, and that's good, but it's the starting point. And so what it all does mean is change really is slow and difficult, and I put in parentheses, painfully slow. That's how I see it personally. And we have these continuing tensions between the faculty and the administration because of this shared governance and because of this conservative nature of our organization. And part of it is, most relevant to this group is, it is an institutional structure that is resistant to interdisciplinary initiatives, whether graduate studies or undergraduate studies or research. It is a reality, and it's something we have to confront directly if we're really committed to this idea of interdisciplinary arrangements, and I think we should be. So there's two types of centers. I'm only going to focus on what I'll call applied research centers. So there's basic science, there's facility-based centers, and they're kind of a creature of a different sort. There's a lot of overlap with what I'm going to talk about, but just to stay focused here, and I think that's most of the interest here as well, I'm going to focus on this idea of applied research. So the basic question is, why do we want to create these centers, and most importantly, how do we? Hopefully, the why we can settle pretty quickly. The how is the really challenging part. So, you know, as President Shirishi said, the benefits, I kind of hinted at it, but you know, I'll be more explicit at it. It is a mechanism for raising a lot more money. So if you're an administrator, you should like that. But if you're a faculty member, you should like that also. It's a way of raising funding, a lot more funding. It's a way of raising the profile of the university as well as your programs. It's a way of having a much greater impact. And it's because what we're doing, if you think about a department of economics or sociology, what's their focus from a problem-solving perspective? It's all over the place, right? What you have with a center is you're laser-focused on a set of specific challenges. And so you have constituencies out there that you can and would be engaging with. Particular government agencies, particular companies and industries. And so you can create that link that is very difficult, if not impossible, for a department or a college to do. And that is the key here to raising profile, to creating the pool of people, the synergies, to put together big proposals, to raise money, to have greater impact. Now, having said that, in all my years, so not only do I have a lot of experience at UC Davis, but I'm on untold number of advisory group boards for university centers across the country, across the world. So I've seen firsthand a lot of centers and come and go. Some of them thrive, some of them not. So as Jennifer said, I really did say to her this morning, you know, if there's anything I really know, and this is based upon talking to lots of faculty and deans and presidents and chancellors, I really think I do have, okay, I'm not going to be, shy about this. I really have a lot of experience. I've resisted becoming a dean or a provost because I love being a center director. I think there's so much reward in it. Okay, the university doesn't necessarily give me the rewards that they should. And they're starting, after 25 years, they're kind of starting to. So, if that's what's going to motivate you, probably not going to happen. Maybe here you can create a culture that will. You got to you have to, reform some of the personnel processes and other things. But you're doing it because you really can have an impact, and it's fun. You're surrounded by a group of people that have all this expertise. It's just fun just to be talking to them, and then it's almost like gravy, the big impact you can have and the interactions you can have with all of the governments and NGOs and so on out there. But having said all this, there is no formula. It's more an art than a science. But I did, after several conversations with Jennifer, I said, okay, let me boil everything down that I've learned So I've came up with 5 strategies. This is my list of 5, and I'm going to go through each of them in some amount of detail. But before I do that, I'm going to motivate those 5 strategies by comparing 2 university centers that I was deeply involved in at UC Davis. Very similar mission, similar activities. One failed, one succeeded. And so I'm just going to real quickly go through these 2 and see if you can guess which one failed and which one thrived just on these few notes. Hopefully it's obvious. That'll be maybe the first test here. Okay, one was the Energy Efficiency Center. That's the one I referred to. There was this competition in California, and we competed against Berkeley and Stanford, and we won, and we were so happy. Our chancellor and vice chancellors were just so ecstatic. It's when you do something like that. We won $1 million. As I said, Stanford then went and got a $100 million gift. But we got started. We immediately created a strong external advisory board chaired by the president of the Public Utility Commission of the state. So once we did that, all the CEOs of all the utilities in the state, they wanted to be on that board. So we had the heads of all the major utilities in California that joined the board. We had famous people like Amory Lovins, that some of you have probably heard of, and a bunch of others joined the board. So I'd say we were clever. Actually, I had a strategy guy that worked for me that was really the brains behind that. So I had lots of other jobs, and so after we got it started, I stepped back, but I found a guy from the business school, a senior professor. He had experience running some smaller centers. We put him in charge, and we hired an executive director. He had an MBA degree, young guy, but full of energy and a lot of those kind of person skills you want. And we got fundraisers involved immediately. In this case, we borrowed them from my Institute of Transportation Studies and kind of loaned them to use to get started. The other one was the Energy Institute, started at the same time. So the campus had a cluster hire for energy faculty. We hired 12 faculty. They were all assistant professors. And the center was premised on these 12 young faculty. They were going to be the core. We did not create an advisory board. We did bring in a senior faculty member to chair it, but he was a really nice guy. Okay, I'm giving away the answer here already, right? If you can't figure this one out, then it's hopeless. Senior professor, nice guy, successful academic, but really not entrepreneurial, really didn't have a grasp of what it was meant to really build an institute or center. And we didn't give it any startup funds. So the other one had $1 million, and the campus, as part of the deal, the campus matched that $1 million over a period of 4 or 5 years. And it had no fundraisers and no executive director. So, I'll say in many ways, the part about the junior faculty might have been the most devastating problem of all. So now those junior faculty members, now they've grown up and, they got tenure, and now they're useful and helpful, and now their departments are, don't have so much sway, don't have their thumb over them, a lot of departments, even in the most enlightened university, put a lot of pressure on junior faculty to stay focused on their department and service in their department and going to all their meetings and so on. But that was the problem, They wandered up. They essentially disappeared for 6 or 7 years is really what happened. All right, so you know the answer to that. Okay, so here we go. This is what I've boiled it down to, the 5 principles, the 5 elements of successful university centers. Number 1 is, we really need an effective and entrepreneurial leader. And entrepreneurial means a lot of different things, but it really means looking for opportunities and being creative and really being committed to it. You know, if I relate it back to the university culture environment, you become a department chair. It's considered, okay, I'm going to be a little, so I'm not, you know, I can say anything I want here, right? Because I'm not accountable to you all, except maybe to Jennifer. But you become a department chair. It's service. You're just trying to keep the faculty from revolting or you know, getting too disruptive and buying off a few here and there. But basically, you're just trying to keep the department afloat and not cause too much trouble. And you're happy when your 3 or 5 year term is over and you go back to the faculty. And every once in a while, they become, a few of them actually like it and become deans or something like that. It's not, this is a whole different situation. You want people that are really committed to the mission and to finding ways every day, finding ways of building that center, you know. And I'll talk in a moment, well, okay, and here. So what that means is seeking funding opportunities, helping, it doesn't mean doing everything yourself, but it means interacting with the faculty, and you know, we'll talk about fundraising in a moment. But it means a lot that there's bridge building here, and there's external bridge building and internal. So the internal, since I've just been talking about that, is building bridges to the faculty and the departments. You got to do it, you know, to be successful, because you got to pull faculty. That is how the university is structured. You got to have some of the academic senate faculty, or whatever you call them here, you know, ladder rank faculty engaged. You need a lot more than that, but that is a necessary condition, I think, to have the sustainability of these centers. So you can't ignore the campus. I have to confess, I did a little of that in the beginning myself. I ignored the campus. I said, okay, I'm going to look just to the outside. You know, campus isn't giving me hardly any money, so, you know, screw them. I'm going to go out there and build bridges with companies and governments, get funding, and we will create some, you know, faculty that are willing to do that. But that's not a long-term strategy. It's not successful. You got to build those bridges. But you build them with faculty that want to cooperate and collaborate. This is not for everyone. And it's not for everyone in a lot of different ways. And then the building bridges externally is kind of the obvious one that I've been referring to, is you've got to build relationships with other organizations that are going to champion you, give you funding, collaborate with you in some ways. There's a lot of different types of relationships that can be created that will help and support and institute the center. Okay, number 2, to be successful, a center really has to be either unique in some way, and or it has to be the best at what it does. Now, when you say the best, it can be the best in Portland. You know, it can be the best center in Portland dealing with homeless. I mean, that's probably good enough, or at least, you know, maybe it's good enough, but that's an important element for doing it. And so, and really figuring out how one needs to understand what exactly that means, because you got to promote this center. You've got to promote it to others. And so you got to know, what is it that's special? Because no one wants to affiliate with this center if it's just another center. If you're just another center that's, you know, doing pavement or building bridges or, you know, traffic signals, you're not going to get much money, you're not going to get much attention, you're not going to have much impact. Now, having said this, there's the business model part of it. So I probably get this from my wife, using that terminology. But I think it's a correct one. You can have a center that just rolls on and have some faculty, and you get together once in a while, do a seminar, and you all like each other. But if you're really going to be successful, it's got to be more than that. And being more than that means having a way of bringing in funding. So if it's going to be sustainable, I do think, by the way, the university has to provide money beyond 3 years. We'll get into that discussion. Okay, so I'm digressing, and since you like that comment, I should explain that a little before I get in trouble here. But it's the idea that you bring in research money, contracts, grants, but most contracts and grants will not support some of these critical functions that you want to do, like communications and events, and even with the fundraising, I think you need, we'll talk about the fundraising a little bit more. So I think that, you need the larger amount, and it drops off, but I think small amount, modest amounts of funding for a good, strong center. But I think, a center needs to prove itself, and by the end of 3 or 4 years, it should be clear whether it is really being successful, and decisions can be made then. So, but it has to have this funding model. So where is this money coming from? And that's why you have to be the best or unique in some way. And, to go back to the homeless model, which, I don't know much about personally or professionally, but I see every city out there, Los Angeles just voted to spend, I think billions of dollars on the homeless problem. And they don't really, and they still, this is a kind of an interesting story. They voted the money with no idea how to spend it. That doesn't usually happen, but that was the dimension of it, of the challenge. They knew they had to do something. They didn't know what to do. They said, okay, let's get the money. We'll figure it out. And so the world is waiting for some good insights and strategies and research on homelessness. All right, so I guess the last point there, it goes back to the funding of these centers, is that one thing a campus can do is figure out mechanisms, and every campus is different, on how to provide some funding back on a continuing basis. So from research grants, the overhead, you can return some percentage of that back to the institute or back to the center. And that's, I think, a necessary. You need some incentive structure here to help, and these centers need that, some kind of core funding. So that's one way to do it, and there's others. All right, number 3. Legally bribe faculty. Okay, so why do faculty, how do you get faculty to do anything? And I think it's mostly 3 things. It's money, good students, and facilities, labs or space, and or some combination of that. And frankly, we need to approach it that way. And how do we engage faculty? Now, you want faculty that are in it because they're committed to having an impact, and they see the value of interdisciplinary. But these bribes are necessary for most faculty. And the money can be generated, it's kind of like Trek here. You bring in a few $1 million, and that, boy, I think that's really worked well, Jennifer, right? All right, number 4. The center needs to provide some value-added activities. And when I say value-added, it can be value-added for the campus, it can be value-added for the faculty, it can be value-added for the students, as well, of course, for the external constituency. So, one of the most important, and I just keep thinking, the more I'm in this business, the more important this is becoming. And that is something the universities, almost every university is bad at, and that is at communications. We do not do a very good job of, to make it sound like a legitimate activity, disseminating our research. But disseminating our research takes on a lot of dimensions, and how do you do it? I spent a sabbatical at a major think tank in Washington, D.C. They spend, I estimated, they spend probably something like 25% of their entire budget, and this is one of the really big ones, 25% of their entire budget on communications and engagement, events. They were holding breakfast meetings all the time and doing all they would fund these kind of policy briefs. They call themselves think tanks, but really, the thinking part of it was this big, and the communications part was this big, whereas in the universities, the thinking part is this big and the communications part is this big. And, I know you're a public, I'm a public university, you're a public university, so we're accountable. So we need to figure out how to do it in a responsible way. But I'm just saying, we spend much less effort, much less money on communications than comparable institutions do. And so this means, it means, of course, doing press releases and meaning holding a lot of events, workshops and doing webinars and it's a way of raising profile and having impact. And when you raise profile and have impact, the money flows. And that's kind of a not so hidden secret in all of this. Now the fundraising part of it, this can be a sensitivity at a lot of universities because universities like to control it. So let me give you my theory on this. I think what's happened in universities is, well, if you talk to any fundraiser, they'll tell you 85% of all the money in the country comes from individual philanthropy. So I believe them, that might be right. And so when you deal with individual philanthropy, you do need that as a centralized function of a university. But when we talk about centers, we're not really talking individual philanthropy. Maybe, like Stanford did get that $100 million as individual philanthropy. Some places are better positioned to do that have been in the business, that have graduates that go and, are in Silicon Valley and so on. But for the kind of centers that we're talking about, the target market, the audience, are governments, local, state, national governments, it's companies, it's foundations. And I've really come to believe that there's a lot of value. In fact, it makes a lot of sense to have fundraisers associated with centers. Okay, you can't do it from day one if you're just getting started, but that really should be part of the thinking. How do you support these centers in fundraising? But because the fundraisers that are going to deal with companies, so I clearly have a lot of experience on this, and I've seen at the university, at the university level, they do want to control it, but they're almost clueless about dealing with companies and foundations a little bit, but they're not able to market us very well. And so yes, you can't have every center running off and all of them going to Microsoft and with their own little pet projects. So you need to coordinate it. So I'm not saying, I'm not urging anarchy here. Don't worry about that. But I do think, think seriously about fund, and it might be a fundraiser, it's half-time with a center that's really focused on the homeless problem and all the companies and governments that might support it. And other kinds of activities are providing assistance to the researchers to do these big proposals. It really is huge amounts of work that we all know to put together big center proposals. conferences, social media. And here's another really important part of providing this value-added activity, and that is building a strong research staff beyond the academic faculty. Academic faculty have lots of things they're doing, classes they're teaching, they're tied up, going to all these committees, meetings we make them go to. Research faculty, you can get good research faculty that, frankly, are just as smart, just as effective, in fact, even can be even more effective than the academic faculty. They are key to, I think, they are key to building a successful research center. Now, you got to figure out how to pay them, and so that's where you create an entrepreneurial culture so that they know, they themselves know, they need to go out and get some of that funding themselves. They can't just expect the director to bring it to them. But I think that's really key if you're going to build a really strong. But to do that, you have to create a culture where they're appreciated. And I've spent a huge amount of time and effort pushing back on the academic faculty who, have this, we're the stars, we're the royalty, and then there's these second-class citizens. And sometimes it's not even intentional. Often it's not intentional. So it's creating that culture where they're appreciated, where they're playing a role in guiding students and given the opportunity to teach classes once in a while if they want to do that, but not treating them as second-class citizens. Okay, and number 5 is, part of what I started talking about earlier, create a culture of engagement and service. So the internal part of that is providing service to the faculty. Because this is part of them, they've already got a heart, and we all have enough things to do to keep us busy and occupied. So we got to make it easy for our faculty. And in many ways, these research centers can provide a lot of service to the faculty in a way that really is compelling to them. Well, I just see. Okay, finishing up my time here. So there's that part of providing service, and it can be, it can provide better service than a department because you are more focused on their specific needs. The other part is the external, which is equally, if not important, and that is creating the culture of these sponsorship, working with companies, working with government agencies, where they're going to be interested in our research and sponsoring it, and creating a culture where, a lot of, to use foundations as an example, most foundations will not fund universities for most things because they see research universities disconnected from the real world and the real problems. And to a large extent, they're right. And so part of the challenge here is creating a culture, say, we really are committed to solving these problems. And we're not going to just sit in our offices writing our papers that might have 2 citations, in the next 10 years. We really are committed to doing research that's going to have an impact and translating that research. So we're going to do all those journal articles, but we're going to make sure that they're targeted to real problems, and partly we're going to do them in a way that we can translate it into programs and technical. So I'll give you just a little example. Over the last few years, I've started working very closely with the legislature in California. And I did get the other 3 institutes of transportation studies in California. We got together, which was as any of you know, the situation in California, that was a real accomplishment. And there was a lot of antagonism, and we really got it together. We said, okay, we're all in this together, either, we hang together or we hang separately, right? So we got together and we started working with the legislature. We got funding, we got $5 million per year from the legislature just this past year, because we had convinced them that we really were committed to the state's problems, that we really were committed to working with all the challenges in California, the city, urban problems, infrastructure problems, environmental problems. And we did, and we worked closely with government agencies and different organizations. It took a lot of time and a lot of effort, but it's paying off. So, one note back to the university leaders here, and that is that what we need from the leadership of a campus is their job is not just to support and provide funding. They need to really champion it. And I think you've got that leadership now here. But I want to emphasize it. It really is key. It's because interdisciplinary centers are not natural entities. They need to be nurtured continually. And they need championing continually. Space, I mentioned space because in most universities the deans control the space, and they say, well, why should we give space to a center when, they don't report to me? So there's that part of it. Facilitating the cross-campus relationships, that's figuring out somehow so that the departments and the colleges don't feel they're being taken advantage of, that they're going to get credit for whatever their faculty are doing and whatever the centers are doing. They need to help, the leadership needs to help facilitate the faculty engagement, maybe tweaking the incentive structures and the personnel processes, and finding new ways. An idea, I really like this last one about explore innovations, and I'm trying to get my campus to do it. It's, I'm not hopeful, but maybe you'll have a more entrepreneurial campus here, is why not assign faculty like 50% time or 33% time to an institute, to a center for 3 years or 5 years, and just move their FTE over there, reduce their teaching load, and say, okay, your job is to lead new initiatives or new centers or new programs within that. And they would put a proposal in to do it, but if those that come up with good ideas and seem willing to do it, why not do something like that? So anyway, there's other kinds of innovative ideas that can be done. Core funding I talked about, you need some amount of core funding going on. So I know those are the key questions that were posed to you by Jennifer. So I'll give you my real quickie offhand reactions, and you'll get into it much more deep. What do you want from a center? And I've kind of talked about it. We want money. We want our research to be promoted. We want help on proposals, and we want equipment and facilities. What you don't want a center to do, well, I don't know, I'll leave that to you. Governance. Most of the time there should be a tenured faculty member in charge, but not necessarily always. There's a lot of people out there, senior people that have worked at national labs, that worked at companies, that are really very capable. Now, usually they don't understand the university culture, but if there's some that do, that have had experiences with universities, I think it's worth being open-minded. But generally speaking, you need a faculty member running these things just, for a whole bunch of reasons. And how should success be measured? You can all figure that out. But these are how much do you leverage campus dollars? Everyone always loves to know that every dollar they invest brought back $10 in research money, number of students employed, profile raised, and there's different metrics one can use for that. And do want to say also that, there are tensions in all of this, that, as we've talked about, departments, colleges, they are going to often, not always, some are more enlightened than others. From my point of view, it means it's being enlightened, but there tends to be a resistance to interdisciplinary centers because it feels like their resources are being taken away, or these are resources they could have used. Departments and colleges often, guard personnel actions, and deans usually control space. So, why encourage centers? Just a summary of what we've talked about. It's a way to raise money. It's a way to raise profile. And all of that is not only good in and itself, but looking at it from a faculty and an institutional perspective, you're going to end up recruiting much better students, you're going to end up recruiting much better faculty, and you're going to be raising the profile, for all of us in terms of our service activities, our impact. So what's not to like about it, right? I love centers. Thank you.
Question. And so I speak loud, stand up and speak loudly.
Could you re-summarize the key things that you look for in center, the leadership, the person who's at the flag?
In terms of who is the leader?
What other characteristics?
I think one characteristic is entrepreneurial in a sense of looking for opportunities to do new things. Engagement with faculty, engagement internally in the university, and a commitment to engagement externally. I think that pretty much sums it up. Yes?
You mentioned briefly the idea of creating a graduate program for the center. Could you say more about what you think
Do we need the mic? Maybe, is there a, yeah.
what you think should be the curricular role?
Hold on, so could you, let's use the mic.
You mentioned briefly the idea of creating a graduate program to go with the center. Could you say more about what you think should be the curricular role of centers, how that works?
Yeah, though it's a difficult creation in this kind of institution. So I know in my case, in the beginning, you just use existing courses and existing faculty, and you convince a department that they should be supporting it, because in practice they don't really have to do anything. Eventually you want to create a set of core courses, so eventually you want to create a situation where either you work out a deal when new faculty come in, do an MOU with the department, or after they come in, probably with more senior faculty, that they're going to teach a core course that will be dedicated to the graduate program. The sooner you can do that, the better, because you do want to create that core entity. And the business model of the university can be designed so that departments and colleges benefit from that. And that, that takes a little work, but it's very doable.
I have a kind of big picture and a very practical picture question, so you pick. So one is, you guys wrote a book. That speaks to a level of integrative thinking, like that there's a real there. People know, like, your center is for this. Goes on national TV. Everybody knows what your center is for. My experience with centers like this is that, at least at the beginning, interdisciplinary efforts start as kind of a Christmas tree, like each siloed idea sort of strung together because they have the same search term, not an integrated model. So I'd like you to address how you span that. And the second thing is much more practical. Having lived this entrepreneurial center life at two great universities, one being here, which I love, I'd like to hear your comments on how our internal, like fiscal HR structures, can create that more welcoming message to our external sponsors. Too often, we just shoot them our IDC policy, and I think there's a way to not sell the farm every time, put up match every time, but have a more welcoming attitude, a more spirit of partnership in our fiscal, personnel, intellectual property, those kinds of infrastructure. So the first is, how do you integrate thinking? And the second is, how do you create a more welcoming interface with our infrastructure?
Yeah, integrating the thinking or integrating the activities is a constant, continuing process. I mean, that's where the leadership plays a big role. You know, having a leader that really is committed to that, engaging the faculty and different ideas, and so that is important. Beyond that, it's, as I say, it's an art. It's the other part about the institutionally, every university I've seen is different and handles things very different. There was a University of Michigan institute that they would not let the institute do fundraising, and in lieu of that, philanthropic type, in lieu of that, they gave them, I think, $1 million a year to cover all of their, everything. So that there's a lot of different models how to do that, and the indirect cost return, some kind of core funding, adjusting personnel rules to reward people that work in these centers. There's a lot of it's really a lot of little things to be done, and the more the better. And I think you've got a leadership here on the campus committed to it. So universities are, as I said, very conservative institutions. So it takes a lot of effort, and ideally you have the faculty at the bottom and the leadership at the top trying to come together on some of these. I've seen our academic senate block more changes than I would like to even think about. Yes.
You're here first. There you go.
Thank you. Could you talk briefly about the financial relationship between the departments, the colleges, and these centers? Is there a danger there? Is there a potential compromise to the funding for departments and colleges that wouldn't factor into the centers that are being created?
Yeah, it's partly the bully pulpit at work here, but it's partly changing some institutionally a little bit. Departments have to see that they're going to benefit, and they are going to benefit. They're going to benefit in terms of being able to get better faculty in their recruitments. They're going to be able to get better students. It's good they have to see it that way, and so part of that is a internal communication process. That's kind of the bully pulpit part of it. And so that's kind of the mechanisms for doing it is figuring out a way that the departments get credit and financially get credit in terms of the students, that might not be in their department, but that are being mentored by their faculty. So there's, it's the personnel processes probably, and the financial accounting processes that often have to be tweaked to make sure that everyone's getting, the bigger idea here is there's a lot more than 100% of credit to go around, and that's kind of the bigger philosophy here is, if centers are successful, we can all take credit for it. Yeah, or...
Hi, I was hoping you could clarify something related to your comment about the failed center, the Energy Institute. Because one of the things you mentioned about it was that it had a cluster hire. And the most exciting thing I've seen here in the 8 years I've been here is a cluster hire that was done last year with 9 hires. This place has been underfunded its whole life and is really thin in most areas. So if we're going to compete with Davis or any place else, we really do need to add faculty. So I didn't really think that you said that was the reason it didn't succeed, but if you could clarify that.
Yeah, okay, let me clarify that. So the point I was making there is that if you hire a whole bunch of junior faculty, you can't expect them to take leadership or initiative, especially with respect to a research center. You need them though. And in fact, the cluster hires are really, really important. And I would suggest that you set aside a certain number of the faculty recruitments that you're planning to do as cluster hires and give some preferential treatment to research centers in that process for helping bring in fact, the research centers are going to help because they're going to help recruit better faculty. And so it's in everyone's interest to do that, but that's where you get in trouble with the academic senate and how you do it. But everyone has to see that cluster hires, you can have small cluster hires. That was a really big one. That was the biggest one the university had ever done. In that case, our university. But 2 or 3 faculty in targeted areas, I think that's a brilliant and very impactful way to go.
Thank you very much. Quick question, could you speak with as much specificity as possible about those faculty in the humanities where they can see a place in terms of the center's process?
There is a huge role for humanities, but the problem is the faculty in humanities never seem to see it that way. I know I'm being a little critical here, but I've been very frustrated, and it's not just, it's in the social sciences too, is that I think it goes back to the disciplinary mindsets in the departments and in the disciplines that they're really committed to theoretical advancements, and this is as true in the humanities as in the social sciences. And so almost every problem we're talking about, humanities have a huge role to play because everything is about people at the end in terms of making change. Behaviors, social norms, institutions. So I think that, I endorse, the idea that we should really focus on the humanities and social sciences, but I think the problem is as much, or if not more so, with them, because quite frankly, they don't even expect a lot of money, right? Actually, the humanities, okay, go back to this bribe metaphor. It's much easier to bribe, in theory, it's much easier to bribe the humanities and social science professors than engineering and science and physical and life science type professors. But somehow they don't seem bribable. So maybe that's a good question for the humanities. Why are they not bribable? And I think a culture should be created. I hope that you can create a culture here where the humanities do see problem solving as really valuable. I mean, she really wants to talk back.
Okay, so one there, and then we're going to have to wrap it up, I know.
Thank you for those comments. I think a lot of humanities faculty are very much for interdisciplinary efforts and extremely interested in the centers of excellence, and I would be one of them. I think the humanities faculty in this university are facing a lot of challenges, and just to mention 2 of them. A lot of humanities faculties here are teaching 6 courses per year, which is a very heavy load for a research faculty member. Another one of the challenges that they face are the difficulties in bringing money, grant money for the humanities. Mm-hmm. So really, I think what we would need in terms of support is related to those 2 challenges. I don't know if you have anything to say about those 2.
Well, the teaching part I will leave. That's a topic I'm not going to touch here. I know better than that. But the money side of it is collaborating with, a center is exactly the right mechanism for bringing money to the humanities, where the humanities faculty are collaborating with others on problem-oriented challenges. I mean, any of these urban studies, homeless, transportation, I'd love to get some humanities professors working with me in the transportation area. And I've got you don't count anthropologists, but an anthropologist has turned out to be one of my best, faculty working in a technical area, working with electric vehicles. So, yes, all for it.
Okay. want to thank you very much, Jim. All right. So our next step, hopefully that's inspired some ideas, maybe little controversies here and there, which I knew Dan would do for me. I know there's lots of things we want to discuss. So what we're going to do until 10:40 is we want at your table to start some discussions. And so I would encourage, there's a bunch of you standing in the back, if you want to join a table, or if there's only one person at your table, to go join a table so that you have some more folks to discuss with. Our plan for the next few minutes is to hear your pitches. If you, the other sort of piece of information and reminder, or if you didn't realize, we are recording this whole event. We weren't recording your discussions. That would not make for very exciting video. That's not going to be a YouTube sensation. But we are going to have the day's events, the keynote, and these pitches are going to be part of the recording that is going to be available for folks who were not able to come to look at. And I think there was something else I was supposed to remind you of, but I'll do that at the end if I can remember. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in the alphabetical order, which was the order of the tables as well. And I know there's a few groups who are opting not to pitch for various reasons. Does not reflect on the quality of their proposal or anything, but for various reasons they're not pitching today. A few have told me, if you as a group have decided to pass on the pitch, just let me know that when I get to your. So, how many of you have been to 3-Minute Thesis or seen it? It's a great event. Those of you who have seen it, who have participated in it, sent your grad students to it, we're serious about the length of time and we cut you off. The whole idea is to be succinct and clear. So my trusted assistant here, Amy, is sitting there with a timer, a 1-minute timer. She'll give you a 10-second warning. And then at the end, we've got a couple different bells that we can be ringing to cut you off. Okay, so, and we're just going to start out accessible and affordable higher education. Are you here? And then, come up here. And if you have this list handy, you know when you're going to come up, so be prepared.
Good afternoon. My name's Brenda Eichelberger. I am from the School of Business, senior instructor. Over a decade, I've been teaching personal finance. We have a problem here at Portland State. According to HEC, our 6-year graduation rate was 46%. Our underrepresented minority rate, 37%. So the number one reason we have for this dropout rate, financial concerns. There's beginning to be nationwide a negative perception of student debt and colleges, and is it worth it? This isn't just an issue here for Portland State, it's for all universities and also culturally for the American population. 40% of us are living paycheck to paycheck. So we're doing some research now in barriers to success with affordability to college education, student financial literacy, barriers to access if you're formerly incarcerated. Oregon is one of 5 states who pays more money for their prisons than on higher ed. So affordability and access, not just an economic issue, it's a moral imperative.
Thank you. All right, wow, great way to start. Next up, Center to Advance Design Education Research. Are you pitching? Are you here? As soon as you start talking, the clock starts. So you can decide how much you want to tell us about yourself in that 1 minute. Okay.
So my name is Antonia Jetter, and I'm with the Department of Engineering and Technology Management. And in this day and age, we are all designers. We design software, we design hardware, and our design decisions have incredible impacts on all of society. And this will become more and more as rapid prototyping and other technologies make design even more accessible. Yet we are not preparing our students for this new future. Our local employers go to D-School to have their employees trained, yet we have a lot of design resources within PSU. It's our job to connect the dots, to come up with discipline-based design education for all fields, and make sure that our students are prepared for the future.
Wow. All right, 17 seconds to spare. Children's well-being.
Hi, I am Will Parnell, and I'm the Department Chair for Curriculum and Instruction and a professor in early childhood education. Center for Children and Families, maybe a new title, we're still working on it. Social, academic, and health disparities have their roots in the early years. Young children and families today are confronted with disjointed access to coordinated supports and services, which adversely impact not only their current growth, but their ongoing ability to thrive. Our center will change the social, health, education, and economic trajectories of families and young children. The center will build systems of collaboration under the four main foci of early childhood: health, disability, education, and family supports. Our center is grounded in social justice, strengths-based approach to children and families that support communities through partnership, research, and education.
All right. Man, you got the word on the 1 minute limit. Wonderful. Civic engagement and impact across the lifespan is not going to pitch today. Whoops, classroom innovation, higher ed. Here we come.
Hi. This is a melding of two proposals, including Engaged Scholarship in Interdisciplinary GE. And this is not your mother's GE. What is meaningful general education? General education has been a hallmark of American higher education, a way of providing citizens with a core liberal education for a century. However, universities and colleges across the country are grappling with how to rethink their approach to GE, particularly as the traditional distribution model seems inadequate. The Center for Engaged Scholarship in Interdisciplinary GE will be the focus of national research into models for innovative general education for the 21st century, answering and investigating big questions such as, how might GE programs be designed to increase access, equity, and retention? How might GE programs be structured to make higher education accessible to students from diverse backgrounds and to support transfer students? What are innovative and emerging models for interdisciplinary and integrative GE? What is the place for...
Ooh. All right. Thank you. Climate change resilient metropolitan regions.
Hi, I'm here. I'm Vivek Chandas. I'm a faculty in Urban Studies and Planning and Research Director for our Institute for Sustainable Solutions. We are not prepared for the most formidable change occurring on our planet, climate change, and addressing its profound implications on metropolitan regions. City governments, businesses, and community organizations are currently grappling with the effects of adapting to increasing frequency, magnitude, and duration of floods, fires, heat, drought, and sea level rise, to name a few, and its disproportionate effect on vulnerable and other communities. The Center for Climate Change Resilient Metropolitan Regions builds on PSU's long-standing tradition and reputation in supporting regional stakeholders with policy development and capacity building to address these climate-induced hazards. The center will support translational research through the co-production of knowledge and practices that are necessary for improving the health and well-being of communities equitably. Thank you.
Just under the wire. Excellent. Community resilience in ecological, socio-technological systems. There's an acronym there.
All right.
How resilient is our region's water supply to socio-ecological hazards like climate change, population, and other hazards facing our watershed? This is an example of one of many types of wicked problems that we hope to address through the Center, or the Community Resilience and Ecological Socio-Technological Systems Research Center. We seek to understand community resilience from multiple perspectives and help solve the wicked problems facing our society and our environment. We'll advance our knowledge in socio-ecological systems with decision-relevant information and working with practitioners and working with stakeholders with different voices to create proactive actions in a dynamic world. We seek to bridge urban and rural divides and other divides between different areas of our university. So.
Thank you. Digital humanities. You're up. After that comes environmental extremes, so get ready.
Hello, I'm Sarah Beasley. I'm on the library faculty. I've been instructed to be grandiose. So, digital humanities enables engaging, creating, and sharing of knowledge about human experience that can be made publicly available to let knowledge serve the city, the state, and beyond. Specifically, at PSU, forms of engagement with digital humanities can include working with the archives and our special collections in the library, customization to Portland specifically and Oregon more generally, locating and digitizing those kinds of materials. Pedagogy-focused, students produce materials that are then publicly accessible and they engage in open research and learning through these materials and creating them. Supporting faculty in emergent forms of scholarship and emerging pedagogy enabled by that creation.
Thank you. Okay, environmental extremes. Here we come. After that is environmental humanities, so get ready.
Hello, my name is Annie Lindgren. I oversee a small center here at PSU. So, the environment is changing in extreme ways, but at this point, we have no idea what life will look like under these new conditions. In the Center for Life in Extreme Environments, we integrate what we learn from life in existing extreme environments with knowledge of projected future environmental extremes to better prepare for life in the future. While many institutions study various aspects of biological and environmental change, we are the only cross-disciplinary center in the country that will address these questions from the nano to macro scale. There you go. Well done.
Wow. Very effective. Environmental humanities.
Hello, I'm Paul Lask. I teach writing here. To articulate what she said, we in the environmental humanities, in some sense, can tell that story. I just ran a writing contest across departments, and we received 70 submissions. A lot of those submissions were not from writing. They were from engineering, urban planning, across the board. So what I'm thinking is there's a lot of closet writers out there who are thinking about this stuff but don't have a place to articulate it. And what we can do in the environmental humanities is tell the story of science. Thank you.
All right. Low carbon cities is up next. After that is going to be migration studies, so get ready.
We are not achieving our greenhouse gas reduction goals at the city, state, or global level. The Center for Low Carbon Cities will work with community partners to develop and assess efforts to reduce greenhouse gases and simultaneously to advance our equity goals. The center will focus on 4 areas where PSU and the Portland region have demonstrated special leadership: transportation, urban planning, green buildings, and materials management. The center will draw on PSU and Portland's national advantage in community engagement to ensure that the center's ideas are effectively disseminated and actually implemented by governments, businesses, nonprofit organizations, and individuals.
All right, migration studies.
Migration is a multifaceted issue. Our proposed Migration Studies Center will connect migration research, teaching, and service to local and global communities and policymakers. This center provides a unique space for addressing the multiple challenges and opportunities of migration, such as forced displacement, human trafficking, climate-induced migration, identity and cultural representation, intercultural and interlinguistic exchange, and domestic and global racial and ethnic violence, global racial and religious violence, to name a few. And moving towards this goal, a team of faculty across disciplines have written and submitted a draft proposal for a summer 2019 NEH Summer Institute titled Migration, Borders, and Belonging, and will be meeting with NEH staff next week.
All right. Next up, Interdisciplinary Center of Applied Social Sciences. Then after that is the planetary health, etc. You know who you are.
The Interdisciplinary Center in Applied Social Sciences, or ICAS, was formed over 5 years ago within CLAS. ICAS now brings together class, social work, Coupa education, and School of Public Health faculty. We seek to incorporate more units as well as individual faculty from the social sciences whose research and practice focuses on the study and solutions to complex applied problems in social science, such as educational equity, disability, immigration, and health. ICAS drives cooperation in research, practice, graduate and undergraduate education, and community engagement. Goals for a formal ICAS center include serving as an incubator for interdisciplinary social science research, resulting in interdisciplinary research grants. Establishing new interdisciplinary cross-unit graduate programs, supporting interdisciplinary undergraduate education, and serving as a hub for applied social science methodologies that incorporate a wide range of epistemologies and methods.
All right, at the wire. Planetary Health and Pacific Northwest Waters, I think previously known as Sensing, Monitoring, and Modeling the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. Planetary health characterizes the impacts of humans on the natural environment and the subsequent impact on our human health. It incorporates environmental science, engineering, policy, advocacy, education, public health, and environmental justice. And it isn't just repackaging sustainability or greenwashing our research, but instead is predicated on the 9 planetary boundaries. Here at Portland State, we have expertise in freshwater use, land system change, climate change, and biodiversity. And as the research and administrative center of the Columbia River, we can translate our science from the headwaters to the ocean into economic and social justice.
All right. Next up, race, inclusion, equity, and justice. And then just so you're ready, after that comes resiliency, emergency, disaster planning, and response.
We're at Portland State. We're in Portland, the nation's whitest big city, in a region in the state with increasing racial disparities, despite progressive politics. The faculty supporting the Center for Race, Equity, Justice, and Inclusion from all across campus have a vision of Portland and Oregon where people thriving and where race is no longer a predictor of life outcomes. We, in the state's most diverse institution, bring a critical academic lens to assessing our context, including a history of white supremacy and a stated commitment to equity that has not yet been visible in impacts. We are on the ground in deep community partnerships, learning about how we can understand, act in, and drive outcomes in this context. This interdisciplinary group of faculty have a reputation in academic and practice arenas, both here and nationally. And with more collaboration and cross-disciplinarity to drive rigorous research, we're poised to take leadership nationally with the visibility and amplification of a center. We know that our students want this work to be visible and to be incorporated into their learning and professional development. Our community.
All right. Resiliency, emergency disaster planning and response. After that, get ready, smart cities team.
It must be said, we in Oregon are not ready for the natural disasters we're facing, including a major earthquake and tsunami, and we had a little test of that this week. The proposed center will create knowledge and evidence-based strategies to advance the resilience of communities in the face of natural and human disasters. We already have in place extensive relevant expertise across disciplines across our entire campus, new graduate and certificate program in emergency management and community resilience, and the chance to be the first academic center and academic program in the state of Oregon on this topic. We're excited and we're ready to go.
All right. Smart cities, and then after that is advanced materials, additive manufacturing.
Hello, Sharks. I'm John, and I'm here seeking $300,000 for 25% equity in the Center for Complete Cities. PSU's most competitive advantage today is its presence in Portland, a city looked to as a model around the world. We have urban expertise and credibility across the entire university. We propose to create a Center for Complete Cities, which uses emerging technologies and sensor-based data to better balance economic opportunity, social engagement, and environmental sustainability. Thanks.
Very efficiently. Smart manufacturing, or change their name to advanced materials and additive manufacturing. Are you here? Ooh, maybe not. Okay. Social determinants of health. Are you here? Oh, okay. Be careful. STEM education then. Excellent, thank you. We're going to be on time today.
The problems of the 21st century will require communities populated by individuals that are strong communicators and are grounded in evidence-based reasoning, able to work across disciplines, many of whom will need scientific, engineering, and technical knowledge and skills. Growing these students will require a university education that embraces innovative, experiential, design-based, and community-based learning. In particular, learning how to grow the diversity of these students so that they reflect the community they come from and bring their diversity of thought, background, and experiences will require innovative teaching and research into what strategies are most effective. One model we see for facilitating this is to make use of our existing STEM Education and Equity Institute, including a number of centers underneath it in one of the models we heard this morning. So we might have the Discipline-Based STEM Education Research Center, the Center for Advancing Design Education Research, Excellence in K-12 Education, and Integration of the Arts, generating well-rounded STEAM literate citizens. Thank you.
Wow. Almost exactly on time. Sustainable urbanization for homeless. Our homeless group is definitely coming up. After that is the Portland Institute for Computational Sciences, so be ready if you're out there.
175,000 Americans sleep outside every night, and over 500,000 are homeless. The Center to End Homelessness engages multi-pronged and interdisciplinary approaches to understanding and removing impediments to ending homelessness. Some of the things we do: disrupt normalization of homelessness, transform narratives, focus on racial equity, attend to multi-generational issues, engage diverse parts of campus in multidisciplinary solutions, advocate for effective federal, state, and local policy, make PSU a model for reducing harm and marginalization, and draw on the expertise and experience of faculty, staff, and students.
Excellent. Computational sciences is coming up, and after that, theory of culture, if you are out there.
Hello,
My name is Parnell Vasilevsky. I'm a professor in Department of Mathematics and Statistics, and I represent a group of faculty from that department who got together, brought two proposals, and established Portland Institute of Computational Science last year. So we already exist. We have an infrastructure in high-performance computing, and we offer service and provide expertise in that area. So to summarize, we will be an enabling center that trains scholars, faculty, and students in computational science that will be using state-of-the-art high-performance computing and for research in broad areas that require such computing, in particular in climate science, in health sciences and policy, engineering design, computational mathematics in particular, and urban planning, modeling, social processes, etc. We also like to enter into, okay.
All right. Theory of culture. Did you guys show up here? You're after that. Okay. Sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry. A little confused here. So theory of culture is not pitching. So we have Universal Design Lab as our final pitch that I know about.
As Linda said, we're the Universal Design Lab, and I'm Samuel Sennett. I want to ask you a couple questions. Does anyone here have a child of their own? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Does anybody have a grandparent? Okay. I want to tell you about something that can happen to anyone. You can lose the ability to speak. Okay? I want to tell you about 3 kids really quickly in 30 seconds, 20 seconds actually. One is a young boy in Brazil that I met in November who has congenital Zika syndrome. He needs to communicate. The second is Linda, and our culture will make Linda, who has cerebral palsy, buy her words. And the third one's my son Liam, and we partnered with Intel and the designer of Professor Hawking's software to do something here, to build a new system. Take a moment of silence and appreciate that we also could help revitalize Native American Indian languages.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for playing along with this idea. We have a few concluding remarks, first from President Qureshi.
Well, I want to thank you all for this really positive reaction and participation. I'm delighted to see all of this energy, ideas, and discussions that you have had. It's very promising. I also want to again emphasize what Jennifer mentioned earlier today, that by no means discussion of the center means that we are forgetting about the solo, single PIs, and so forth. In fact, those are equally important. What I want to say is a few words about, as you are thinking about developing proposals for these centers, and after hearing the presentations, you can see that there's a great deal of synergy among a number of those. And the best thing is that now that you know who is thinking about what, trying to get together and try to create more effective, stronger teams rather than to try to create too many individual ones. The questions that I want you to ask yourself is, what is the problem that this center will address? Why that problem needs a center? Why is it that either a single PI or 2 or 3 PIs cannot get together and solve that? The second is, why PSU? Why is it that whatever you are proposing is something that PSU should be doing. Look around. Thank God with the internet, now we can search everywhere. See how much competition is out there, because the last thing you want is reinventing the wheel. The next one is ask yourself this: why would either an organization, whether federal, state, or an individual, or a foundation, want to invest in this problem? Because as we talked about, there are many problems, but you got to keep in mind that these centers need to be supported beyond what the university can do. So keep in mind and ask yourself, who's going to pay for it? And in fact, your proposal will be stronger if you identify the source of funding that you think are potentially be interested in the ideas that we have. And finally, keep in mind that you need to have a vision, a goal for the center in the sense of what are going to be the outcomes. Let's say this center is successful. After 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, what are you going to be able to achieve? All of those are important. With that, again, I want to tell you, I'm so delighted to see your participation and your ideas, and I think we're going to do very well. So good luck, and looking forward to seeing the proposals.
All right, and I want to thank all of you for participating in this, playing along with the formats that we've come up with, and I encourage you, send me emails, ask me any additional questions that you would like to. The other last thing I'll leave you on in our, actually I'm at 12:30. In order, one way that we want to help foster some additional collaboration with OHSU is we have scheduled a PSU OHSU faculty mixer on February 22nd. A save the date email has already gone out. You'll be getting another email to RSVP for that. We're specifically people who want to collaborate with faculty at OHSU. We want you to come to this event. If you can't, we'll have some other options for you. But putting my plug in there. And with that, I want to thank all of you and have a good rest of your day. Thanks.